Hello, and welcome to the St. Paul's Newman Center Homily Podcast for the 20th Sunday in Ordinary Time. This week, Father Rob invites us to reflect on Jesus' healing encounter with a stranger, an encounter that changed not only her life, but his life and ministry as well. As always, all of the readings for this weekend can be found at usccb.org. Let's take a moment together in silence to connect ourselves in prayer to God and one another.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At that time, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman of that district came and called out, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But Jesus did not say a word to her. Jesus' disciples came and asked him, "Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us." Jesus said in reply, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But the woman came and did Jesus homage, saying, "Lord, help me." Jesus said in reply, "It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." Then she said, "Please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." Then Jesus said to her in reply, "O woman, how great is your faith! Let it be done for you as you wish." And the woman's daughter was healed from that hour. The Gospel of the Lord. For me, that's one of the more troubling parables, stories in the life of Jesus. He seems to have total disregard for this woman, and then to use the image of masters and dogs and children. That's not the Jesus I'm used to imagining. It is a chance for us to ask the important question, who do you imagine Jesus to be? Not just what did he look like physically. We're in a great time of rediscovery, helping us move beyond traditional European depictions of Jesus into a more authentic image of what the God-man may have looked like when he walked among us. Now, not just physical description. How did Jesus think? What did he feel? How did he act? Those are ultimately unanswerable questions. But particularly, Jesus' own self-knowledge as the Son of God. What does that mean, and what did it look like? There are many interpretations to this story, one of them based upon an all-knowing Jesus who is in control of every situation. From that, two different interpretations have come. One, he knows that he's going to heal the woman, or her daughter rather, and is simply asking the questions to test her faith, to see if she believes enough. Another interpretation is that Jesus decided to use this as an opportunity to teach a message to his disciples. He knew what was happening, he knew what he was doing, and he wanted them to see the message of God's kingdom as for more than just the Jewish people. Or maybe there's another interpretation, and maybe it begins understanding the complex reality of a divine human person. But if Jesus was like us in every way but sin, we have to assume that in his life he learned and changed and grew. Maybe this is one of those growing moments. Let's not forget that Jesus was reared in the first century as a Jew, and that he lived his early life mostly, if not only, among Jews, and that he spent almost all of his ministry as an adult among Jews, the children of Israel. His training was Jewish. His Bible was what we call the Hebrew Scriptures or Old Testament. He absorbed a faith that maybe perhaps from a sense of self-preservation considered Gentiles as other, even as repulsive, unclean, taboo. Jesus was a member of the chosen race, the royal priesthood. And so let's just imagine at the beginning of this encounter that Jesus was stuck in such mindset, and that he came to a place where Gentiles lived. There he encountered this persistent woman. if he had not had time to think much about Gentiles previous, this would have been the first chance to really rethink commonly accepted views about those others called Gentiles. Maybe, as he began to think it through, he kept silent at first, not knowing exactly what to say or to do, how to respond. Imagine Jesus praying in that moment, Lord, what do you want me to do here? What's God's intention for this moment? Imagine Jesus wondering how he could deny her request for healing her daughter, but at the same time, how could he follow the traditional teachings? How could he even begin to concentrate on the needs of the Gentile world and still have time to contemplate or complete his primary ministry among the Jews and reach Jerusalem, where his destiny lay? So he said, I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But when she persisted all the more, as he tried to escape the grasp of her need, his frustration with the dilemma pours out, and he says, look, it's not fair to take the children's food and to give it to the dogs. But also imagine his love pouring out when she countered, at least give me a crumb, like a dog under the dinner table. Let us imagine how her words seemed like a mirror held up in front of a common understanding of who was in God's favor and who wasn't. And let us imagine her words cutting to the heart of Jesus' compassion and faith. Now he realizes that standing before him was a Gentile whose faith and desire for God's healing exceeded that of so many of his own people. So he was changed. Putting what he thought to be the greater mission aside for the moment, he realized, woman, how great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed. At the heart of the story is an encounter with the other, an openness to the other that can bring about mutual change and healing. This week at St. Paul's Newman Center, you're invited to put your faith into practice by going to find an encounter with a neighbor. You get to decide what that definition of neighbor is for you. Maybe there are people in your neighborhood on your own street that you've not met before. Maybe someone new has moved in this summer. Maybe there's someone in Laramie that hasn't met you and you haven't met, and you're just called to encounter each other, and you need to go to a very different neighborhood or place. Bring something with you, some cookies, a welcome basket. Maybe it's just a simple welcome card with a short story and description of your own family. Maybe you want to share with that neighbor some of the things that you or your family likes to do. You might find some commonalities. Maybe if you visit long enough, you want to ask them if you have a faith community. If not, maybe you want to invite them here to St. Paul's Newman Center. If they do have a faith community, maybe you want to ask if you could go with them at some point in time to experience their worship and their tradition. Well, there's plenty of possibilities for the week ahead, but let's return to the story for just a moment. Instead of putting ourselves in the shoes of Jesus, trying to decide what to do, or the disciples watching it unfold, what if we tried to imagine the story from the point of the Canaanite woman? What desperation is she feeling with the illness of her child? One thing we know, she is moved by a love that only a parent can fully understand or appreciate. She breaks all the rules today. She approaches Jesus alone as a woman. She calls out to him in the street. She persists, facing what is almost certainly going to be for her humiliation. After essentially being called a dog by Jesus, what must her face have looked like? Can you imagine the strength it took to utter the next words, looking up into the eyes of the Lord? Please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from their table of their masters. My friends, at this time in our history, the image of dogs and scraps and masters is all too vivid for too many of our sisters and brothers. Probably most of us will never be able to understand the profound depth of the feelings in this scene. Would it surprise you to learn that most people of color more easily identify themselves with the Canaanite mother in this story than with Jesus? They cannot escape regular reminders that they and their children are often valued more like dogs than people. Their only recourse is persistent pleading, which often falls on deaf ears. This summer, people who have enjoyed race-based superiority and privilege have been confronted with the cries of those who have had to satisfy themselves on the scraps that fell from the tables of power. The pandemic conditions and economic recession have again revealed the wounds in our country in which the poor bear a disproportionate share of human suffering. And you know better than I that a disproportionate share of those experiencing economic hardship are people of color. As we listen to the cries in the streets, are we annoyed? Are we angry? Are we disheartened at the great suffering? Are we able to experience compassion for the plight of someone different than ourselves? Or are we able to stand back and to see something we may not understand and to say, "Oh, woman, how great is your faith? How great is your faith in a different future? How great is your faith that things can change? How great is your faith that your child might be healed of the illnesses of poverty and the lack of education? How great is your faith that you too will have access to proper medical care and housing? How great is your faith that you will be reunited with your child taken as you cross the border? How great is your faith?" My friends, we come to this place week after week to be renewed in faith. Maybe we actually come to be presented with a new faith that is less about wanting things to work out for me and more about believing that things will work out for someone else, because God is going to work through me to help that happen. One of the beauties of this Eucharistic table is that regardless of color, education, wealth, status, we all join the same procession. We all take our turn, one at a time, coming to be fed the healing presence of Christ. And then we are sent out of this place to be that presence in God's world. So, as you think about the week ahead, who is your neighbor? Who will you visit? What will you bring? What will you say? What do you hope to hear from that person? When you go to visit whoever it is that is your neighbor, will you go as Jesus approached the Canaanite woman, bringing something to someone in need? Or maybe, will you have the vulnerability to approach with the courage of the woman, confident in the presence of Jesus in your neighbor, and believing that through an encounter with that presence, you too will experience healing, or at the very least, have the opportunity to change and grow.
Thank you for joining us in prayer again this week. A reminder that you can sign up for liturgies by visiting newmancenter.org or by calling the office at 307-745-5461. Until next week, peace, God bless, and be well.